Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Hash, where we bring you the latest and greatest in crypto and culture. My name is Naomi Brockwell, and today on the show, we have Jen Sanasie, Will Foxley, and Ben Powers. Welcome to the show, guys. And we're going to kick off today by talking about Gary Gensler. What has he said now? So, Gensler, SEC chair, he has said that crypto markets won't last long outside of regulatory frameworks. He says that platforms should be asking for permission rather than begging for forgiveness. He suggests that history just tells you it doesn't last long outside. Finance is about trust, ultimately. We can dig into that one in a little bit. And he also said that crypto has no border or boundaries. And he's asking European regulators to figure out a way to work in cooperation with him, which is probably, what's the word? A hidden phrase for, we want to control everything. We would like you to comply. But I will throw this to the group for your thoughts. I definitely have some thoughts on this. Will, going to throw it to you first. Gensler he keeps on being this man who wants to rule the entire crypto sphere. How do you feel about that?
Deeply confused. Every time I see a headline like this, I am just...
Gensler's gonna Gens.
Will has just embodied all of our thoughts.
Not only like shaking my head, but scratching my head at the same time. This reminds me of a tweet from Ryan Selkis, not the one that you're going to pop up here in a second, Naomi, but an earlier one from a few months ago talking about Gensler's prior history. I think he worked at MIT, or at least he spoke at the MIT Bitcoin conference. He talked about like the benefits of Satoshi Nakamoto's invention and the benefits of that technology itself and how it could be applied to financial markets for the future. And he gets in this position, the SEC, and we're seeing everything kind of being labeled a scam. And maybe there is like a silver lining here that they do get some of these scams out there, because there are scams out there. But I don't have a lot of confidence here. One thing that is also interesting to note is that the EU typically has much more aggressive policies when it comes to dealing with technology companies. It's not uncommon for them to levy fines against bigger players in the space like Google, and that's been done time and time again. And so if we're aligning our policies with the European Union, does that mean that on the technology front, the regulations are also more stringent here in the US just because we need to align with them? And that gets into a whole lot of issues about like U.S. sovereignty and the way that U.S. citizens should be governed. Should not be according to regulations in the EU. But I want to throw that down to you, Ben, because you've been covering a lot of big tech battles over the years.
I mean, if we're coming into alignment with the EU, I'd love to see something akin to GDPR on the federal level here. Just saying. But no, I think that this is interesting in one sense. Like, Will, you sort of hinted at this. Gensler had seemingly been somewhat open to, the idea of crypto and also decentralized networks and stuff when he was not in public office. To me, this seems very much so like the pressures and contours of the SEC like weighing on an individual. Like once you inhibit this role in this body, you sort of maybe rein in some of the stuff that you felt free to say prior and try to bring things into regulatory alignment with the administration that you're appointed under and serving. So to me, it's a real sort of like politics enters real life, and then we see like the pressures of sort of the legacy of these institutions come to shape individuals' views. And that being said, I wonder too if he's kind of like pointing out to the EU in particular, because the EU has a Bitcoin ETF. Like they've approved some of these things. They've been a little bit more experimental with some of this stuff than the US has. And I wonder if he's trying to like proactively sort of try and maybe claw some of that back and rein it in if the EU does decide to be a little bit more liberal with some of its policies in this regard. So that's sort of my initial thoughts on this one.
Yeah, Jen, do you want to jump in? And then I want to read out some interesting tweets on all of this.
Yeah, sure. Both Ben and Will mentioned Gensler's past at MIT. I believe he taught a blockchain course there. And Ben, to your point, it's not like he was forced into this role at the SEC. It just seems odd that he would be such a proponent for the technology and then take on this role and fall under the weight of the SEC if that's what's happened. I want to read a quote from him that was in one of the articles. He said, "For those who want to encourage innovation in crypto, I'd like to note that financial innovations throughout history don't long thrive outside of public policy frameworks." And he added that this asset class has been rife with fraud, scams, and abuse. So, Will, you kind of mentioned the fraud and scams above, but I mean, if we think about an international regulatory framework for crypto as a way to promote innovation, we just have to look at what's happened in the States to see that that is not the way forward. If we want to promote innovation, international regulatory frameworks are not the way. We've seen several companies leave the US because of this. And so it just doesn't make sense to me. But I'll throw it back to you, Naomi.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, the SEC isn't going after the fraud right now. They're going after people who are selling securities. So, they're going after companies like Library and XRP. I'd like to know who was defrauded by Library. They haven't had a single consumer complain. So it doesn't seem like it's all about protection. But I do want to read out these tweets from Ryan Selkis because it hits the nail on the head about this whole thing. He says, I'd be absolutely humiliated to work for Gary Gensler when another colleague had years ago proposed a faster, better, common sense safe harbor framework that would have solved most of our consumer protection issues the SEC pretends to care about for American crypto investors. Obviously, he's referring to Hester Peirce and her safe harbor rule. Then he goes on to say SEC's approach is anti-growth, anti-retail, who would fare worse in the Gensler correction, anti-innovation, and makes the insane assumption that it would make sense to wait for government permission. The crypto industry has been engaging for years on how to innovate cleanly. And it goes back, recently Eric Voorhees had a similar tweet when Gary wrote this tweet that says, crypto industry should not be going right up to the edge of a rule and searching for some ambiguity. They should be staying far back from that. And Eric tweeted, this is the very opposite of the best elements of American spirit or human spirit. Let's not make this about just America. Human nature is about progress and innovating and finding ways to push boundaries. And Gensler's saying don't push those boundaries because the law, it's just such a backwards way of looking at all of this. And then the final one I'll bring up is from Brian Quintes. He was the former CFTC commissioner. His last day, I believe, was yesterday. So that's kind of interesting. But his tweet was all about, it was sort of alluding to what Gary was saying about controlling this DeFi space. He said, from my experience, fraud usually involves a level of centralization or control as well as opacity. Query if those two conditions exist in true full DeFi systems. If not, how does the idea of investor protection change or shift from the government's to a participant's prerogative? It's just such a great point. You have these smart people who are thinking about DeFi the right way, and then you have Gary Gensler who comes in and he's like, we need a global commission. We need to all work together, consolidate on the American framework for fighting this thing that we no longer have control of. It's just kind of crazy. But Ben, I know you have some more thoughts, so I'll throw to you.
No, I'm going to take us on a slightly sideways track, but also mention that Coinbase, for example, is doing a free crypto giveaway. And it's can we please move past that? Because when we're talking about fraud and scams and things like that, it's those kind of models that allow scammers to actually gain purchase by imitating these sorts of things later down the line. So, if the centralized institutions and part of the big lobbying arm of crypto, for example, in the US could not engage in seemingly behavior that will contribute to scams down the line, that might take a little bit of wind out of Gensler's sails. But again, that's a little bit of a side rant on my part.
Yeah, the giveaways are so fun.
No,
I got 2 Bitcoin.
No.
Yeah, what do you think about El Salvador's giveaway, Ben?
No. No. Bad. Don't do it.
No.
We cannot. Let's go the other way because everybody always says yes, and I'm just no.
I'm with Jen on this. I love the giveaways. I don't think that people should stop doing things that are perfectly legal just because illegal people, might twist that and start, imitating that and actually defrauding Naomi. People. I'm going to take this down a path.
It's legitimate giveaways that reinforce and bake in the legitimacy and lend credibility to scams and trick people into it. Obviously, do your own research, but if you see free giveaways all over the place, which definitely happens in crypto, it only makes scams that much more potent. So that's where my riff inside on this one.
But that's because people want these giveaways. So all these companies are doing is actually giving people what they want. So I don't see anything bad with that. All we need to do is actually focus on the bad people, not the good people who aren't defrauding anyone. Don't persecute the tools.
My knee-jerk reaction was going to be people don't know what they want, but then I decided not to say that.
Oh, no, Ben. Oh, no.
I know.
But anyway, back to GENSLER. So he's really taking this like global reigns attitude where he's pulling in people all over the world and saying we all need to, work together and combat crypto. He talks about it in terms of protection. But I mean, Ryan Selkis has such a great point where the best protection that has been proffered so far has come from Hester Peirce, who is an SEC commissioner. And it seems that Gary is just kind of ignoring her. And she's crypto mom. And I believe we also have crypto dad in the SEC camp as well now. Two commissioners who are pushing back on what GENSLER is doing and pushing back on the overreach, but GENSLER doesn't seem to be listening. And it's just a really sad state of affairs because they are shutting down innovation. They are stopping companies from, giving consumers better products or stopping projects from growing because people are afraid to develop in this space where everything is this gray area. And he talks about engagement. Ryan made a great point. People have been engaging for years about this. Library itself had tried for years and years and years to try and get any sort of clarity from the SEC. They asked them repeatedly, how can we do this legally? And the SEC said they can't give them an answer. I mean, what kind of clarity is that? What kind of engagement is that? So it all
that
just
is
seems
the
like
definition of ambiguity.
Yeah.
So when they say we're looking for the crypto industry is looking for ambiguity, we're not looking for it. It's ambiguous. Sorry.
It's called nuance. But Will, I think you got the next story for us today.
Let's go on. Let's move to the next.
Ben's
subject.
done with this conversation.
Ben's done.
We'll beat on Gary Gensler's.
After I took us down another one.
We'll beat on Gary Gensler's door yet another day, I'm sure of it. But Twitter is looking to integrate Bitcoin payments via its tip jar feature. So apparently, a little code sleuther went through Twitter beta and found out that Twitter is integrating Strike, Blue Wallet, and the wallet of Satoshi. Right now, this is not in production, and it may not even be available for beta users quite yet. From the AML side, it's interesting to note that Twitter won't really be interacting with like the payment side of this. It'll be going through like these other providers, and they would probably have to make like the considerations about how to report that money moving around. So basically, this would be like a tip feature for Twitter, which is really interesting. They're also looking at launching a new set of emoji reactions along with this, which of course is fantastic. But Jen, you're a big Twitter.
Way to just pin that tail on the donkey there. You were like,
I know.
Also emojis, which I love more.
Emojis.
It's probably like the bigger story here, but we have to focus on Bitcoin, right? So, But Jen, you're a prolific tweeter. I'd send you some Bitcoin. What's your reaction?
I'm not
to
a
this?
prolific tweeter, but when this feature rolls out, I will be waiting for my tip in Bitcoin. So, I love the part of the story that said that they're going to be giving tutorials as a part of the rollout of this tipping feature. So they're going to be giving tutorials in Bitcoin, the Lightning Network, I can't speak English today. The Lightning Network and custodial versus non-custodial wallets. Yeah, I'm just speaking Canadian. And so I think that's really cool that they're going to be giving tutorials while they roll this feature out. It reminded me of when you get your driver's license where you do like the written test and then you can move on to the drive it, like the next phase of the license. And I thought, regulators and politicians are always saying, nobody understands, everyone is at risk. And what a great way to address it by offering this educational material that you watch beforehand. And then you can just start tipping people on Twitter. I would tip all of you, except maybe Ben.
I will take.
Sorry.
I was just going to say,
I got ratio really bad yesterday.
Oh my gosh, we don't even need to get into that. Nobody loved, after Mr. Foxley here was talking about Syndicate tweeting in Morse code, I started tweeting in Morse code and it got, just test the engagement levels, got 0 likes, 4 comments.
I liked it.
And Will was one of those comments. I know Naomi and Jen came and saved me.
We don't count.
Well, it can't. No. I was going to say prior to that, Will was like, "You can't get ratios. You can't divide 0. All right, like it's fine." Anyway,
guys,
if you want to hear what Will's
Twitter
voice is, that's what it is.
Ben's greatest Twitter moments. But I want to talk about this Twitter payment feature, which I think is very, very interesting. I mean, this is cool. If they integrate this natively, like you've been able to tip people on Twitter for a long time through third-party apps. There have been all kinds of different tipping bots that have functioned on the website. You also have like Brave integrations, so you can tweet people, tip people using BAT, which has been really cool. I sometimes get some stuff thrown my way. and they're integrated on a bunch of different websites. But now that Twitter is integrating this natively, I mean, that's a huge step. I think that that's really exciting. And it seems that they're using Strike underneath it. Is that right, Will?
Strike, Wallet of Satoshi, and Blue Wallet is what they're looking at integrating right now, which Strike is probably the most
sense too.
Like fintech-ish kind of wallet of those three. Blue Wallet and Wallet of Satoshi are very much so Bitcoin first wallets. Strike is kind of like an almost option between Cash App and Bitcoin.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're going to use this? You're going to start tipping people? Because I know, Will, you don't like to use your crypto for anything.
No, I hold my Bitcoin.
He already said he's going to tip me. No. Well, how can you just say you're going to tip me and then retract? Yeah.
I'll tip Jen only. It is just like one final thought on my side is like Jack Dorsey integrating this it's a pretty big deal for his application. From my understanding, he doesn't have a majority share of Twitter stock, and as a CEO, that kind of influences like your ability to make decisions sometimes. But he's forging ahead with these Bitcoin plans. Regardless, he really wants to see this become a part of the Twitter platform and the Twitter experience, and that follows after so many people in the cryptocurrency space dogging him for not integrating payment options for other types of cryptocurrencies, like notably Ethereum, which there's like pretty simple ways to integrate Ethereum, but he's like Bitcoin only. So interesting to see like the intersection of Bitcoin maximalism and the corporate world on stage here with like this code rollout.
I mean, this makes too much sense, like in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Like, I'm surprised we didn't get here quicker. When we first heard about like potential tipping on Twitter, we were wondering, is there going to be is there going to be like a crypto element to this? And obviously, like Jack was personally boosting and like integrated like tippin.me when that was a thing, like into his own profile and stuff. So he's been really interested in this for a long time, particularly with his, conversations around, for example, doing like a Bitcoin DEX and stuff like that. I'd be really surprised if this doesn't happen, because it feels like all the stars are aligning for this to have been the case, just based on his background, previous products, and also this being a feature on Twitter more generally.
Yeah, and I just use Will as a case example here, because although I'm really personally very excited as someone who uses crypto, it's interesting we have this narrative around Bitcoin where people are like, don't ever spend it, just hold it, keep it forever, diamond hands, all of that. And people are now thinking that just because we move this to layer 2, suddenly people are going to want to start using their crypto. They're going to want to start spending it and giving it to people. Like, it's this disjunctive narrative. The type of people who are using Lightning Network, they're generally, Bitcoin maximalists. They're people who have Bitcoin at the forefront of their crypto sphere. And, I'm just not seeing that transition happening. I'm not seeing people going from saying like, this is something that we hold, to suddenly like, I'm going to spend this. And I don't see how we're going to make that shift. I know that lots of Lightning teams are trying to make that shift. They're trying to get people away from this only hold narrative, like, or if you spend it, spend and replace, or, just convert everything to crypto, just live entirely in the crypto narrative. But we haven't seen that transition in the Bitcoin camp yet. So I'm wondering whether something like this will help it, or whether this will just flop and no one will use it. But we will see. But I will throw this to Jen for the next piece. What's going on with CryptoPunks?
All right, hold on to your horses. We are going to Hollywood. So CryptoPunks have officially entered Hollywood. The popular Larva Labs NFT project has signed a contract with United Talent Agency. So other Larva Labs projects that have signed contracts have been Meebits and Autoglyphs. Now, this is an interesting conversation for me, because people are spending millions of dollars on these CryptoPunks. We've had the conversation about IP rights on this show before. And now Larva Labs have signed a contract with United Talent Agency. They're one of the largest talent agencies in Hollywood for these CryptoPunks to appear on TV, in movies, in publishing. And so it's really interesting. These are like the first Hollywood celebrities from the crypto world. Naomi, I'm going to throw this off to you. What were your initial thoughts when you saw all these little CryptoPunks on their way to Hollywood?
I mean, is this going to be
Sounds
like
so cute when you say it like that.
ridiculous,
I know, all these little guys.
Hollywood movie?
Those little
I mean,
guys.
like, Hollywood to me epitomizes these gatekeepers
those
and
JPEGs.
Institutions like these management agencies represent these gatekeepers that I feel like crypto is moving us away from. And so now that, we have all the tools to kind of decentralize those processes, decentralize licenses, have things, permissions built into smart contracts, and then CryptoPunks, which is meant to, represent this kind of early crypto ethos, is now joining one of these gatekeepers to handle their licensing. I just thought it was a little bit ironic, but maybe it just means that the crypto ecosystem has not matured yet, which it hasn't. We aren't at a state where those licenses on blockchain are ubiquitously accepted or, even considered legitimate. So perhaps we've got a long way to go before we can do that. But I definitely do hope that we start to move in that direction, because it really is nice for people to be able to control that stuff themselves and not have to go through like management agencies in order to license things off and give permissions to things like Hollywood films to use their intellectual property. So it is just kind of this interesting like collision of worlds happening here. But Ben, I'll throw to you.
I mean, yeah, making money moves, right? Like that's really what this is, because as much as we talk about,
it's like when your favorite punk band sells out, signs the major record deal.
It depends on how much money they're going to sell out for. Like that's kind of the whole point of NFTs in a lot of ways too, right? Like is making money, doing the flippening, and a variety of other stuff. No, I think this is really interesting. I think this is going to get into like, again, battles about licensing, Naomi, like you were talking about. We're going to start having like IP rights being raised again. Like we're going to have representations of CryptoPunks in movies or TV shows or other things. And it's going to be like really weird. And so seeing this as like a like talent agency sort of look at these NFTs and think about how to do it, like, and also like, Tom Brady's platform is being looped into this as well as a number of others. This raises a lot more questions than answers for me, and does feel like a kind of like circling back to the world of centralization and gatekeeping like you were talking about. So it's a little illustrative of the lengths that people, or the lack of lengths that people are willing to go to fully decentralize, and sort of like, we'll decentralize, but to an extent in this centralized world. So that's kind of my thing. But for the most part, I think it's just sort of the capitalistic undertones of the market. Like you're going to go where money is, and if you can make money off of it, like go do that, rather than a commitment to maybe the idea of what NFTs are supposed to represent.
I want to brainstorm really quickly what this would look like in actuality. So like, how would they have a CryptoPunk in a TV show or a movie? Would it just be like, just kind of placed there, or was it going to like be animated and be kind of like moving around? We'll see like the rest of the body. Or...
I'm imagining like an animated character, like makes an appearance in Rick and Morty or some other animated show The Simpsons.
So there was recently like a 3D, like sort of a 3D NFT sold that was like a character that you could put into things like GTA and stuff like that. And so maybe that's what they're envisioning the future as, is you have like this character that can occupy the metaverse or occupy TV or film in a variety of different instances. Again, I'm getting over my skis here. Like we're brainstorming, Will. This is not like a legitimate...
We're brainstorming. This is a live brainstorm, everyone.
But maybe that's how it goes. Because otherwise like static versions of a CryptoPunk in some form in Hollywood sound pretty boring, to be honest. Like that is not the most entertaining content I would tune into.
Yeah.
I can imagine this being a really boring TV show, like an Angry Birds type scenario. And you have like this story about it is just people trying to hop on the bandwagon and different entities trying to get involved. But on a flip side, I want to do a Jen here and talk about the silver lining of this, because she always provides the positive spins. And I always appreciate that.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank
you for bringing the optimism.
But she's wrong.
Although this does seem, she's wrong. It does seem like there's a clash of worlds here. It also just shows the complete integration of crypto at this stage into our existing lives, which is really cool to see. I don't think people who got involved with crypto in the early days expected things to move so quickly. And they probably expected that, this would remain on the fringes for a long while. But it goes to show you how influential these fringes can be, and how influential and powerful all these nerds that popularized it could be, right? Because you have the smart money kind of looking to all these smart people and what they're involved with, and suddenly they all get involved, and then things skyrocket, and then you have dumb people in Hollywood also getting involved. Sorry, Hollywood. No, huge fan. But, it is interesting just seeing that complete integration.
They're not
there.
all dumb in Hollywood, Naomi.
Sure, they're not. But Ben, let's
They're dumb
talk
money,
about what's
though.
going on in the EU. Some interesting things around search engines.
Yeah, absolutely. So PRESEARCH, which is a decentralized search engine akin to Google, but without a lot of the other things that come with that, and we can talk about that more, is going to be listed as a default option on new Android devices in the EU, which is interesting because it's actually putting a sort of blockchain-based decentralized search engine as something you can just pick on Google's own, operating system. And, as we talk about all the time on this show, the adoption of decentralized technology is really difficult usually. So even sort of the initial aspects of saying like, hey, this could be listed as a default option, meaning like, one of 12 or whatnot, and people can select it, is a fairly big gate to get into the door on things like PRESEARCH. But Naomi, I want to get your initial thoughts on this one in terms of, why this is an interesting idea, and also why PRESEARCH is an interesting idea more generally.
Yeah, I mean, PRESEARCH has kind of eluded me up until recently. I just did a piece where I was exploring alternative search engines, and I didn't cover PRESEARCH. And all the comments were filled with people saying, what about PRESEARCH? I'm like, oh, is this a new thing? Like, I hadn't really looked in it. So I'm remiss in my duties there. But now I'm kind of like diving deeper into it. I mean, it is the search engine world is really interesting because Google does have 92% share of all searches in the United States. So that's a huge market dominance there. And that means that they can control information that people get access to. There've been all kinds of Senate hearings where they've shown that, Google does influence people by auto-filling in things that they're searching for as well, so they can really manipulate people's thought processes by choosing specific things to autofill. But there's also censorship issues. We had this thing, recently, it's not just with Google, but in the anniversary of Tiananmen Square massacre, we had the image of Tank Man was removed from Bing's search engine. It was just deleted, censored. And because DuckDuckGo uses Bing on the back end for their image search, it was also deleted from DuckDuckGo. So suddenly you start to get a picture of how heavily these search engines rely on each other. Like you have pure search engines, which have their own web crawlers go out and create their own results. Then you have meta search engines, which basically rely on things like Bing and Google and other pure search engines to pull their results. So it's kind of this very incestuous relationship. And then you have these P2P search engines. And it seems like PRESEARCH is one of those. It's kind of something similar to like SeerX, which is this like decentralized model where everything's P2P, but it seems that PRESEARCH has found a way to monetize it, which is very interesting. They have this Ethereum-based pre-token. And that's a very interesting world to me. It kind of is reminiscent of the IPFS world when you had Filecoin becoming the fuel for that system. If you want decentralized storage, suddenly you have a way to incentivize people to hold this data. It seems like PRESEARCH is kind of tapping into that. So I'm very interested to explore this world some more. I have to admit, I don't know a whole lot about it yet. So I'll throw back to you, Ben, for your further thoughts.
Yeah, I've actually interviewed PRESEARCH's founder a few months ago, and they've been around since 2017. They're kind of taking the approach of like build this thing slowly and a little bit carefully because they recognize, just what a behemoth like the Googles of the world are, and just how quickly sort of information indexing can go wrong or just be ineffective in a variety of ways. And so this also, PRESEARCH kind of emerged out of their own sort of kerfuffle with Google, where the founder was like trying to build a local business listings site and Google was downranking it just because they deemed the information low quality, amongst a number of other things. And so, to be clear, like when you use a search index like Google is sort of up-ranking certain things, down-ranking certain things, and like putting its thumb on the scales in a lot of ways in terms of what information it deems to be most valuable. And so the idea of PRESEARCH is you're not having that sort of algorithmic bias show up in a variety of ways, right? Like you're actually just going to have the information fed to you. And that is a really challenging thing, though, to be clear to like indexing is like super unsexy, but super integral to like building and finding anything on the web. And it's, it's like these standards that I get so excited about sometimes, but nobody else does, in terms of trying to understand how the plumbing on this, on this site, on all the sites of the world work. But Naomi, I'll toss back to you for some closing thoughts.
Yeah, I would just say that when you deal with search engines, like you hit the nail on the head, Ben, when you're talking about the up ranking and down ranking, because people use Google for a reason. They give you the search results. Like they have such a granular insight into who you are as a person.
Easy.
They can show you what you actually want to see. So when
it's easy to put Google ads at the top result.
Well, when you use these decentralized ones, because I've tested a whole bunch in the past month, the research results are not as good. And let's be honest. So there are trade-offs with these, but it's definitely the direction we're moving towards in society. And I'm so happy to see more and more decentralized products out there. But let's close this up. This has been an awesome show. We'll be back tomorrow at 12 for another episode of The Hash. But stick around because we have some things going on at 3, all about Bitcoin with Christine Lee. And then tomorrow again at 9 a.m. We got Michael actually today on All About Bitcoin. And then tomorrow morning at 9, we got more Bitcoin stuff. So stick around. But we'll see you as usual every day at 12. Thanks for watching The Hash. And Will, Ben, Jen, see you tomorrow.
See ya.
See ya.